So my name's John Athade. I work for LivingSocial. I run the team that does our internal UI, UX, and front-end work. There's 4.5 of us. One person's half-time, handling about 25 internal tools. And we do a lot of that with a pretty complex SASS setup and deploy that through a Rails gem. I also do a lot of freelance work as Meticulous, and I've dabbled in film, and then I am another pragmatic programmer's author like Hampton. I wrote the Rails view. So if you're interested in the Ruby on Rails view layer, that's something. We have a discount code, which is up on the little sheet they handed you. A lot of the stuff I work on, I do, like I said, I do the internal apps, LivingSocial. I also use a bunch of SASS things, tricks to kind of target various MSIE pains in the butt, even some things with Firefox with tables that we found. Similarly with media queries, there's on the Meticulous GitHub, there's something that Lynn Wallenstein and I wrote called Keanu, breakpoints, point break, had to go there. I've used this also. I've used this also in 2 different places that are outside of the Ruby community. The State Decoded is an open government project from the Knight Foundation. It's a PHP project, and we're using SASS to do all the templating, and then we compile it and serve it. So it's not being served real time, but we're using it in the development side. And I'm also doing this on a .NET MVC project at Guggenheim Securities here in New York for their internal tools. So that's me.
I'm Elise. I'm the person who yelled that I was from Austin the other day because I had just walked in and didn't actually know what the question was. But so it's awesome to come to New York. It's kind of my first big conference panel thing. I work at a company called Square Root. We build an application that does operational efficiencies. So we're pretty small. We're about 25 people, but it's technically enterprise software. So I think unlike a lot of people who are doing client work, I have work on products and apps. That's kind of where I've been for the past 5 or 6 years in my career. I'm a Girl Develop It instructor and also an instructor and mentor at Makersquare, which is a 10-week dev boot camp in Austin that just got started. So they do a little bit of front-end stuff, a lot of Rails and Ruby, and we're starting a nighttime front-end only course, which is super, super exciting. I don't know if I know you guys have stuff like that here in New York, but it's really cool to see that come to Austin. And I also just joined up with Dave Rupert. Familiar with Dave Rupert? Yeah, Uncle Dave. Just joined up with him and Andy Kyle and Sam Kapp on the ATX web show, trying to kind of organize that and get some fun podcast love going in Austin. Like I said, building a product or an app versus client sites. I did client work, but then switched over to kind of working on products. So I feel like there's a lot of different challenges. Love to talk about that. Multiple themes, single code base. Both of my last 2 jobs have been theming for different clients off of the same code. So I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about that. Refactoring, maintaining styles. I work with offshore devs. And I also tweet way too much because that's how I like to take notes. So we can talk about that too if you want.
Hi, my name is Rachel Ober. I live in New York City, and I work for a company called Paperless Post. We do online invitations, cards, stationery, and we also released a paper product last year, so the name is a little ironic. I love it. Let me see. So I do front-end web development there. In a past life, I was a full-stack Ruby on Rails developer, so I still am very passionate about Ruby and Ruby on Rails, and I express that through Rails Bridge and teaching through General Assembly as well. If you're familiar with General Assembly, they started off as a co-working environment, but went on to offer different classes if you wanted to learn programming or maybe product management. They have those type of things available. With Rails Bridge, our mission is to teach or introduce women to Ruby and Ruby on Rails. If you're interested in helping or taking one of our classes, we have something next month, so please look us up. And then I've also helped organize a conference called Write Speak Code, which is also, its mission is to help women write op-eds, create proposals for conferences, and also to contribute to open source. So those are some of the things that I'm passionate about besides just front-end technologies. But I'm really passionate about mentoring, Rails Bridge, running workshops, and I love corgis. I have one. If you'd like to see pictures, you can come and talk to me after the show. She's my baby.
I love Rachel's corgi. So I'm Pam, last name pronounced Selly, in case you're ever in that situation where you guess and you're wrong. I'm Pamasaur on Twitter. My blog is The Webivore, Pamasaur, The Webivore, dinosaurs, they're cool. So I work at Comcast now, and working on the Xfinity.com project. Before that, I've only been at Comcast a little while. Before that, I was working in journalism, doing news applications and data visualizations for an investigative journalism startup. It's a nonprofit, and I don't think nonprofits can be startups, but let's not editorialize. Alas, that didn't work out. So now I'm at Comcast and doing big stuff on big web properties like Xfinity.com. So, and actually, I also, before Access Billy, which is an investigative journalism, I was at Paperless Post, and I built the first style guide at Paperless Post that Rachel now has to deal with. So John started this. The brag slide was like, well, let's also talk about the other things we do. So I also teach for Girl Develop It, so fist bump. So I teach JavaScript. I run a JavaScript user group in Philadelphia, and I'm not a designer, so I designed the logo. It's supposed to be like the Liberty Bell, but you can obviously tell that it's just like a lightning because I just took a lightning-like shape in Photoshop. Anyway, and that's my first cover article for a magazine, so yay.
Yes.
And so things, so since I've been in a bunch of places in the recent history, you can ask me about making your case or when it's not worth it to management or teams, kind of the battle of shinyism. I have dreams about pre-commit hooks. That's a recent thing, my new obsession. When you have to give in to using other people's frameworks, which is something I was very anti before I did my stint in journalism, and then I was like, oh yeah, reusing stuff other people wrote is not so bad, is it? Then working with designers for developers, because I think there's a lot of designers here, and if you're a developer and engineer and don't really speak design very well, I've made some attempts. I really enjoyed, what's your face? Tim, your talk yesterday? It was good. I felt like that was a very good perspective on that. So, yeah, and so that's us.
Oh.
So I think, did you have questions for us? I know we had some that we could start with.
We can self-moderate here. I have
your questions up as well.
Yeah.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you can put on the
Sweet.
board. Like if we can put a.
Oh, I don't know if we can do that.
Yeah, I've got
Do you have questions, or can we just raise our hand?
Both. I mean,
Both. Submitting is nice because then we can.
There was a hashtag, the SASS Conf panel hashtag, and we got like 3 questions. So like, I think 2 of them were from the same person, Jason. Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, but you can just ask too. Good, let's start. Go.
Oh, okay.
I think.
What do you like?
Yes,
Yes.
you do. Yes.
Sorry, we were just having this nice little conversation without a mic.
Thank you for asking.
So I just wanted to ask, what was the hashtag? I'm just kidding. No, this is for Elise.
Yes.
Okay. I work for a company called Ushahidi. It's a open source software company based out of Kenya, and we develop a crisis mapping software where we aggregate data, and our software analyzes the data and puts it on a map to visualize the data that they're receiving. It's open source and people can deploy it. So theming is a big thing that I'm about to take on. This echo is crazy. But so our software is deployed in 159 countries, like the 2.0 version, 2.x version.
Okay.
The 3.0 version is coming out probably next year sometime. But I'm excited about theming because of the SASS color stuff, the workshop today. But I just wanted to hear your opinion on how you approach theming with one code source, because it's the same thing. Single code base, multiple themes, and then I want users to come in and customize and theme as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. So I'll go ahead and stay right up front, like with the user customizing part. That's something I don't really have any experience in. I just isn't something that we have to do in our app, so I don't really have any help for you there. If anybody does or they do that, please just like raise your hand in a minute and we'll talk about it. So what I do is we run a Rails app, and we have a variable for whatever client, right? And so that variable pulls in a theme-client .css.sass file. And the only thing that's in that is a couple variables that are overriding variables elsewhere. So particular colors, I think a couple like styles, like a logo image, 10 lines of code, something like that. And then that imports my base.sass. And base is just a list. I mean, you've seen this a couple times today, like that, just like the list of imported Sass files, right? And that imports config, which I believe, who was the last workshop? John, you had like your init, right? I mean, so like I have config, it's kind of the same thing. And so that has all my variables in it. And so the ones that are in the theme client are just only the ones that I want to overwrite, and then all the rest of them are in config. And then it just imports in all the rest of my, like, I have broken it up into like utilities and modules. And so with the colors, what I do is instead of naming like what the color is, I have a handful of those. I have like gray, light gray, dark gray, black, white, whatever. But then I have like primary highlight color, secondary highlight color, or primary color, bright, dark, secondary color, highlight color, tertiary color, disabled colors. So I have these kind of like third layered color variable names. And so then in all the rest of my code, it's not, the link color is, bright blue. It's the link color is primary color bright, hover is primary color dark. And so then you just redefine that in your client style sheet. That's the first thing. And that seemed like it's worked well so far. It's mostly colors that we have done because we don't have a whole lot of like real visual flair in our app. But I can imagine that would be easily, extended to doing, fonts and even some more complicated like actual like modules, like really styling the modules differently. The thing that I have had the most trouble with is being able to kind of like change that on the fly, right? Like, if you wanted to like load up one client and then like change it to another, or like have certain things be different, I don't know. I've been trying to come up with some like ways to make it more interesting than just like compiling the one at the beginning. But yeah, as for like adding that third user layer, I'm not quite sure how that would. Does anybody do that? Has anybody had to do that? You? Yeah? Do you have anything to add?
I suppose. A couple of years ago, my company wrote a web app.
What's your name?
I'm sorry, what?
What's your name?
Oh, sorry. My name is Justin Sipple. I work for the Motley Fool, Fool.com. And so we built an app, a web app for AOL, and they have all these brands, and the themes need to be different. The appearance need to be different for each brand. So, you just. I would say the first thing is nothing is concrete. Like she just said, you name your colors and you redefine them. When you're in your themes. So yeah, I would recommend really trying to follow Smax. I follow Smax, and I also have kind of a themes. I forget if is themes part of Smax?
Yeah, that's actually.
Yeah. So you do that, and it's all structured so that you can do this, right? So that you can switch between. The other thing is images, though, and that gets a little bit harder. So I'm imagining in your stack, in your Rails or your Python or whatever, you're going to have a variable that holds the name of your theme, and you're going to branch on that. Oh, sorry.
No, it wasn't. Were we talking yesterday about the new 3.3 stuff and their like image URL path stuff? Was that? Yes.
That was like a soon feature, right?
Yeah, like the image URL image path things, and you can like do.
Well, so that works if,
really
if it's going to be a
about
background image, right? But usually, if you're doing image tags, you can't do that with Sass. So you have to keep that variable, that theme name in your whatever your web stack is.
Right. That's the thing that I was kind of saying I've been struggling with. So you can't do like, it would be really, really neat to be like, okay, so like for the logo that we have like the client's logo kind of in the header, it would be really cool to be able to do like, you know, icon logo, and then in the SASS it's like URL / client name that's a variable / you know, logo.png. And so then you just like in your client folders, we have a folder for each client, you could just put your image and name them all the same, and then like whatever your like client Rails variable is, and that's how we used to define it, like it would just kind of pull it in, and you can't do that. So I think that's kind of like the last thing. That would be really, really neat.
The other a couple things I just thought of. Don't forget that in SASS we have other types. We don't. I mean, you know, you can have switches and stuff, booleans. So you can say if, you know, we're going to show this, and then you set in the themes you set up those switches for, oh, we're going to show this, we're not going to show this. Yeah. So that's about it.
Cool. Thanks for adding.
Can I add in? So to the original asker, because there's kind of 3 different things here, right? And I think I mentioned this yesterday when we were first thinking about SASS. Like static was a big constraint. We didn't want kind of the user picks a color type of dynamic generation stuff. But I kind of think there's 3 different ways to do this. There's the I log into some hamptoncowan.com. Go there. And I want green background, right? And I think SASS is not the right answer for that kind of thing. So it's like a multi-tenant environment where you have a ton of users and little knobs they can turn. That's probably just, you know, good luck with it generating some CSS or something, right? Then there's theming. So that's, we have one application and we want to generate out 10 different looks, and it's all hosted on the same. And then there's, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but if it's deployed in a bunch of different countries, is it like an app that they install on their machine? Yeah, so then in that case, you just really make a, you know, user.sass file, and then have instructions in there on what they should customize and replace logo.ping with this logo. I think that's the way to do that.
That's cool. That's really cool. Reveal.js, so I've been using Reveal.js for my slides, and they do that, like with their themes. They have like a theme.scs and like all their like base stuff, and then there's this additional like all these like variables and stuff that you can just customize and like add in your own stuff. So that might be kind of a good way to do that. You can look at the way that they set theirs up.
And if it's, I mean, it's different for you, but if you have something where it's one customer deploying a lot of themes, like it's more of a white label that's a held system, you can have a theme folder, and they can, every time they clone it, they just go in and put those overrides in the theme, and that gets included, and you still end up with one style sheet. Sometimes they'll get paranoid and want to actually use a CDN, and that's when I would suggest you actually have 2 different master style sheets, your base and your overrides. But if both of those kind of, I mean, there's so many, it depends variables.
Yeah. Well, and I have a question for you guys, because I'm just going to jump in. Well, I'm just curious, it's kind of to all you guys. How did you first get introduced to SASS? Like, was it a person? Was it some blog post, seeing a talk by somebody? I'm actually just curious, because there's a question I don't know of a lot of people.
I'll
take my answer off the air.
I started working somewhere they used it, and I was like, this sucks. Because I went in and they had separate, I was like, this is the worst god-awful thing you could do to your CSS, because they had a separate sheet for every single page. And then they compiled it all into one horrible, horrible thing. I'm talking about paperless posts. I didn't say that.
She was before me.
Yeah. So, but then I embraced it, and like Compass was a big win for me, introducing Compass, and saying like, hey, how about we have sprites instead of, you know, like artisanally crafted sprites. That's what I would call it. It was like actually generating sprites versus artisanally crafted, Brooklyn made, whatever.
Organic.
But yeah. So it took me a little bit to get on board, because I think what I was seeing was a bad CSS problem and not a bad SASS problem. But that was my first reaction to it, and then I really enjoyed it once I got into it.
For me, I was still mainly doing Rails development, and then they're like, hey, you can do front end, and we're going to make you, you know, pigeonhole you into that. And and that's whenever I guess the asset pipeline got introduced. mainly into Rails, and we were starting a new application, and they're like, hey, look at this SASS thing, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. Oh my God, nesting, and I'm like, remember that picture that was up there where you kind of like, oh, I can just kind of like do HTML, head, body, this is great, right? That's how you, no, but I learned my lesson, got slapped on my wrist. But yeah, I definitely enjoy Compass, creating placeholders and all of that stuff. It in general makes my life easier. But then I also have to deal with people who abuse it as well. But generally, I think it's a great thing to have in a project.
So was Paperless Post the first time that you?
No, it was previous to
Paperless
Post, yeah.
So my company before where I'm at now, we had a white label stuff. So like we're injecting a bunch of stuff onto client sites, and we can't edit. We were designers and we couldn't edit the HTML. So we were like styling to match client sites with only the CSS. And it was one of those things that had like started out and like all of this had been done by developers, like Java developers. Like, you know how cool it is like have Java developers write all your HTML and CSS and then you can't change it? That was awesome. So
okay. So back at this place where they had SASS, like I was then given this, I can't remember what the product was called now, but it was basically a CMS, but I couldn't actually get to the CSS that I was supposed to edit. I could like include stuff, and then I couldn't edit the HTML, so then I had to write really crappy JavaScript to insert elements into the, oh my goodness.
All right, that's way worse. You got me way we just couldn't like get the CSS edited a lot because it had to go in like our default repo, and we didn't want to do that because it could like break backwards client compatibility because we had all these old clients. Anyway. So we ended up actually using less. So like this design team, and there was some reason that we chose it, probably because it wasn't on Rails. I don't actually remember. Like I wasn't involved in that decision, but I was on the team that kind of went through and took all of our CSS and was like, okay, well, what can we pull out? Like the comment module over here is the same as the comment module over here, although it's actually not. Like it's completely different HTML and CSS, but can we like write this in the same way and like combine the classes and use variables and stuff so that ultimately it's styled correctly. And we actually rolled our own version of less that had only like some of the features in it into our code base, which was really strange and interesting. But had a really, really difficult and interesting time kind of doing that, like going from like all this like nasty CSS to kind of like using this. And I, unlike Pam, I think had a really good experience with it because it was so much better than what we had. I was like, I can make these things look the same without like wanting to rip my hair out. And so then a while after that, I just kind of wanted to see what the other one was, right? Like I had used less, and SASS was getting a whole lot more traction, and so I went to kind of check that out. And so the first SASS I ever wrote is actually the code that I'm using on my blog, which is like out on my GitHub, so you can go look at like how awesome and terrible it is. But you better do it soon because I really need to go change it. Yeah, and then kind of like never looked back.
Bit history.
I know. Oh.
The Wayback Machine.
Yeah, it's not that awesome. There's not a lot of nesting, hopefully. Anyway, but so when I moved to the company that I'm at now, I'm kind of working on we were redesigning all of like the front end, all the like UX and UI, and kind of rewriting all of it. So I had the opportunity kind of like to define our front-end tech stack, right? And I was like, oh, I'm totally going to use this. This is going to be so valuable for doing stuff like theming. So I was on board. Like I thought it was so awesome like the whole time. So.
And John?
I was the guy that was OCD about how my final CSS file looked for years. So when I first saw SASS and less, and I saw the minified output, I was just like, oh, this is awful. And so I stayed away from it stupidly because of reasons along those lines. And I finally got to the point where I was starting to get into some really complex stuff, and I needed something. I was already breaking things up into tons of folders and files and all this stuff, and doing awful imports and just really slow production things, but it was kind of like, it has to be clean in this way. And I started working on, this is almost 2 years ago, sending out the LivingSocial style guide. And I'd been writing the Rails view at this point, and the asset pipeline was out, and we had been playing with it, and we're like, okay, this makes sense. It gets compiled down, and it's easier this way. But I went full bore at that point. It was just like, I will now not do a site without SASS. If you want to have a static site, that's great. I'm running CodeKit. And I will still commit everything, and here's your SCSS, and here's your artifact, and do what you will after that. But it was really one of those things that once the light clicked, it was kind of like the end of Temple of Doom, or Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he opens up the Ark. He's like, oh, wow, this is awesome. And luckily, no explosions or anything crazy like that.
Face melts off.
Yeah, face off. Yeah, in the as some of my Deadhead friends would say, it melts your face, man. But it was really that kind of. I stayed away for it for stupid reasons. But once I had that rationale and that full jump into it, it changed everything about the way I do front-end development.
I think you brought up a good point, that it's an authoring tool. Like I think a lot of people, especially who are resistant, are like, I know CSS. Like I don't want to like replace CSS. Like why is SASS like this different thing? And it's like, no, I mean like it should be an authoring tool to like make your dev life easier, right? And your end result should be approximately what you would have written anyway. Like if you're writing good CSS, you're going to write good SASS. You're not going to get like this horrible like nested like crazy stuff because you are being thoughtful, which is what you would have to do in CSS anyway.
Yeah, with us, we do a lot of internal tools, so the loop, we will loop through things because it's like I need to make something that's 1 through 60. Now I'm not going to write that by hand because that would just, you'd be sitting there like stab my eye out. But 6 lines of SASS and all of a sudden, boom.
So we've got some questions from the audience that we're going to field to you guys. This is one that I also am interested in hearing your thoughts, and you can all take a stand on it. But can you talk about the differences in using off-the-shelf frameworks versus rolling your own, and when and how you decide and what you do?
You have feelings.
I have feelings.
Let's hear your feelings.
So one, I have a general disdain for Bootstrap. Yeah, I thought like everyone, most people now have a general disdain for Bootstrap, but honestly they've changed a lot in the and it's funny actually. NetMag had they had an opinion piece from some person, and like it got taken down, and I would use the Wayback Machine to like reference back to it, and then I saved it. But yeah, his good point was like at least the good thing that came out of it is it gave us a certain kind of design language. And so like that's what I do like about Bootstrap, is that there's some like thing to represent like, the doodly-doo menu that does the thing, like, without having to sketch it. I really want to spend a little bit more time looking at some of the frameworks that leverage SASS. Like I do like Foundation a lot. I think they have a good vocabulary. And just anyone who's actually using SASS in their framework automatically gets some points because you can choose what you want. And like one of the like worst things in CSS is that there's no namespacing, right? So like you get everything. So like theoretically, by getting to choose what you pay for, which you can do if you have a SASS-based library, you explicitly import things like you would in a logical language like Python. And it can make things a lot better. But yeah, I want to hear John's.
Why do you have a disdain for Bootstrap but not Foundation?
I have feelings about this, if I can interrupt. Yeah.
Like I generally I really appreciate the mobile first and responsive thing. I honestly haven't gotten to fully check out the new Bootstrap since they went flat. But like having a grid that is percentages, that is the only way I can conceptualize it, grids, as fractions, the whole 60 pixel grid thing that a lot of people do. I just I can't conceptualize it. So I really appreciate responsive grids make more sense to me than the old way people did grids. So I just really like the way Foundation does that.
I think for me, Bootstrap, like Eric was saying, don't give me buttons, give me like a thing that I can make buttons with. I think Bootstrap gives you a lot of stuff. It's really, really difficult to do something different than what they have given you.
Yeah.
Right. So
everything with Bootstrap looks like Bootstrap.
Well, I mean, there's themes on it, which is cool, but like it's so hard to take that apart. No, they're getting better about that. Like you can pull out some of the JavaScript stuff and you can just pull out like some of the parts that you want, but it's so hard to customize. And Foundation, especially for the simple layout stuff, is much more lightweight, I think, right? It gives you kind of this language with which to write layout stuff and not a whole lot else. Like it doesn't really apply a visual style.
Well, there is.
I mean, it has it, but it's not like,
but in like
aggressive about it, I think.
Yeah, it's not as opinionated. It's closer to a normalize.
Right. So that's
almost like a foundation. Sorry, it was too easy.
For me, the issue with it is that I find a lot of people do it as bootstrap and forget it. Like, I've signed, that's my design. I've solved my design problem.
I don't have a designer, so we use Bootstrap.
But that's awesome, right? Like if you're a developer and you're trying to get a plugin out, and like you just want it to look nice, but you don't want to take all this time, like that's great, and that's what Bootstrap is for. But that's not the tool.
There's also so many other ones too.
Right.
Like I really like. There's actually like there's this one that I like that's very poorly named called Base CSS, so it's virtually ungoogleable. But like I think it's like base.io or something. I make no warranties for that link. But like it is like solidly like it's normalized plus some grids and stuff. That's it. Like I'm sold. Like and then I think someone responded because on Twitter a few weeks ago I got frustrated because I really just wanted a sheet that had my percentage grid system, and I just wanted to have it. And I went to the OOCSS repo, and the like OOCSS now has like Vagrant as a dependency. And like, why does your CSS library like depend on Vagrant? Like, I shouldn't have to run an Ubuntu box in order to use your CSS library.
That is a little bit overkill.
Yeah. So like, I just want some percentages, and someone sent me like one that is like it's like they mellowed out a little bit, and I have to find that again. But
no, tweet it. I'd be curious to see what it is.
Yeah.
It's possible to overcomplicate things. And
yes.
I think that kind of like
very much
went overboard.
That's why. So for me, I like rolled my own framework at work, and I don't mean that I like wrote a framework that is in any kind of like way releasable as a framework, but I just like I said earlier, we don't have a lot of visual style, and so it wasn't important to me to like have all of this stuff right that came with all of these frameworks. And I needed some very, very simple things. Like I need the absolute most simple grid thing possible, and like 4 media queries and like 1 CSS3 mixin. Like but like buttons. Like I wrote a whole bunch of button stuff, like the way that Tim was showing in his talk, like with the extends and like the button classes. So to me, that was a better choice, right, than like having all of this stuff in my code base and then having to like take out the parts that I want and like screw with it. So like writing my own was the correct solution to the problem that I had.
At Paperless, we already have a gigantic code base. It's one monolithic app that includes both the admin side and this application, and then there's some mobile stuff shoved in there as well, that whenever we were looking at all of the different responsive grids we could potentially use, we didn't want like another JavaScript library also added in that, because we're using like 3 different types of JavaScript. We have jQuery, Mustache, or handlebars, and God only knows what else. Sometimes I just don't go looking in that folder. But it's just kind of like, well, I really just want the grid. We can create our own buttons and work off of that and try to just pick out the things we need rather than the entire kitchen sink.
And we went the opposite direction. Actually, we started, when I got to LivingSocial, it was the monolithic app, and over the last almost 3 years, we are now a complete service-based architecture, and there's tons of apps, which presents a totally different problem of getting all of them to look and act similarly, because it used to be designed by developers. So it was, oh, okay, that works. But, okay, it works, but it's not effective at all. And what we ended up doing a lot of, we started off and started pulling in all the little pieces that we liked from Bourbon and from Compass and stuff. And I think, I can't remember who said it, but someone had said in a talk that your life cycle with Compass starts off where you think Compass is amazing, then you think you can recreate Compass better, and then you get back to saying, no, I should have just used Compass. And so I have done that entire life cycle. And we're like, we have a bunch of stuff now that I'm currently basically porting out to put Compass back in. Because it's like, why am I now, like every time there's a push, I'm going and pulling stuff and replicating it, and it's like, I now have included pretty much everything of Compass. It didn't start that way. It was like 4 things of Compass is all I needed originally, but once you start solving all those problems, you start realizing, yes. The other thing that drove me nuts, and thank you, Chris, for removing grids from Compass. That was one of my only complaints about it. But Twitter Bootstrap, if you ever put span 12 in your HTML, I should come over and smack you. It's just, that is horrible, horrible stuff. That stuff needs to belong in the style sheets. That's what is great about things like Suzy and there's lots of different grid systems that we can use. But that is really about style. It's not markup.
Can you expand on that? Because that was actually about to be my question, was you kept talking about these frameworks and using the layout systems inside the frameworks, or as opposed to like Singularity and ZenGrids and Suzy are all like build your own layout system. Right.
So I come from print. So for me, grid systems is kind of just the way you think about page layout. I started off literally on Pica sheets with this massive grid of 12 points going everywhere, and so everything's a column and fits into this massive grid that you establish. And so when coming to the web, it was these 960GS and all these kind of systems like that I was looking at, and they all had the same fault to me, which was that it's this, you dump all this crud into your HTML to get this layout kind of thing working, and it's really brittle, at least in my experience. And so what we started doing was when we found things like Suzy and stuff like that, being able to say, a column is whatever, and we did we had one that Lynn built called the Marcotte grid, based off Ethan Marcotte's responsive thing. And so it's somewhere up on GitHub, but probably massively out of date at this point. But it was something we tried for a hot second, trying to see if that was a better way to do it too. But again, that's all on the style side. It's all in the SCSS, and it gets compiled down. So you're dealing with something that keeps your code semantic. You're not saying span 12 and tacking that onto a bunch of other styles. You actually name it what it is.
You're saying that you're anti-using classes to represent grid position?
Oh, absolutely.
I hate that.
Oh, I'm pro that.
That's why
Let's
it's
fight.
a panel.
Fight.
Differing opinion.
Some more?
Oh no.
Just unrelated. I'm like looking at this Twitter feed, and the questions that are coming in on this are freaking awesome. I want to we're not gonna have time to get to all of them, but they're all super good.
What are you talking
Yes,
about?
there's some really
We're
good
not
ones.
Here.
We don't get to see the questions.
Now you do.
All right, so let's go through them. There's one question that came in. Are there any websites dedicated to showcasing all the style guide formats out there that you can recommend?
So I saw this question earlier, and I don't know. That was your question, right, Jason? Yeah, I don't know. We talked about some of them. Who was listing them on in their talk yesterday? It was earlier in the morning.
I only know that I have an Evernote document that was keeping all of that.
Oh, really?
I didn't share it with anyone.
You're talking about KSS and that kind of style guide generators, that kind of stuff. So, somebody listed them. It was KSS and DSS and style doco, and there's one more. I don't know if there's a list out there, but we'll go to the Googles later and see what we can find out. So.
Sounds like we need to make the website that showcases all the style guide.
Somebody do that. Go right now.
Yeah, just do it right now.
Or someone start a Stack Overflow question, and then everyone here can respond to it.
Yes, that is a genius idea. Jason, it's your responsibility because it was your question.
Make it so.
Claudine, are you going through the list?
I am.
Okay.
Yes. So the next one kind of follows that. What style guide auto generation options are out there? Yeah. We talked about that one. How about, what are some strategies around migrating large CSS projects to SASS?
Whose question was this? Hi, what's your name? Bill. Hi, Bill. Have you all done this? Yeah. Okay.
I have not. So I don't have an opinion, I guess.
So, I have.
I've done SAS to SCSS.
Oh, that's probably easier.
Well,
than
that's
the
what
other way around.
that's what I currently want to do at Paperless, is that we have this
You can
amalgamation.
run it.
I don't know. I did that, and then it was complicated.
But you're talking about from CSS, you have a whole. What kind of app do you use? Site app?
It's a white labeled app. So
do you have a microphone?
Microphone.
Just change the file extension.
That's what.
That is the first step, right?
That's what I was going to say.
It's like a white
what?
label app. So we have like 30 folders of vendor specific CSS and then like one common .css. So I've tried, I've converted the common CSS, but how do I go about like?
So Bill, let's talk about your vendor folder.
This is an intervention.
No, I mean like not like
Your vendor
Bootstrap
folder
vendors.
Are these actual style sheets that are like a black box of like you get them from someone else and it's a vendor? It's not a black box. I'm seeing a head shake.
It's not always, yeah. So like the clients can specify.
Then they don't go in your vendor folder.
No. I don't mean like jQuery as a vendor. I mean like these are our clients folders.
Okay. I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm like kind of working on a talk about this, and I'm going to give it in November. And so this was just kind of like weird because I haven't like explicitly done it. I've just kind of like seen other people do, like helped other people do it and stuff. But the easiest thing, I think, start with the things that are small and easy, right? Like color variables, right? Like if you're using colors throughout, like, and then the joke, right, like is change your extension .scss. Like, oh, no, you're doing it. You're using SASS. You have officially switched over.
Done.
Right. Cool. All right. Questions over.
Step one.
It's actually
step 3,
true,
profit.
But then go for the cheap ones.
Right. Go for the things that are easy.
If you can measure it and say like by doing this, I got to delete like XKB out of our files.
Right.
Like numbers always win.
Yep.
So like
definitely.
I talk about it a lot because I'm not as good at it, and I always remind myself because I get all excited about like, man, I'm gonna benchmark all the things, and then I get too excited about like destroying all the things, and then like all the things are destroyed and I can't benchmark anymore.
I've never had like it end well where I'm like, I'm gonna just change everything all at once.
Yeah,
it just never works out.
Refactoring is
Iterative.
Right, it's iterative, but like start with something small, right? You can do your colors. Then can you go back, and you said you have like multiple clients, so you have all these different style sheets. Like, can you go through and do like make into variables or mix-ins things that you're doing in all of those places?
Yeah. Or even just partials.
Right. And are you, the easiest way that I think about it is, there should be a whole section of your refactoring that does not change your output at all. Right, like it doesn't do anything. You don't change any class names, you don't really like change. You don't have to look at your HTML. Like you should test, but you should be doing things, changing variables, changing stuff behind the scenes in your style sheets that make your life as an author easier. That don't actually change the output, right? And if it's about, and I know you kind of wanted to talk about this. If it's about convincing your team that this is worthwhile or like that it's valuable, start by doing some of those things, and you're like, look how much easier the authoring of this is. You don't have to go change this in 12 places anymore. I've pulled it out. And the last thing I'll say about refactoring is inline comment documentation as you go, right? Like Rachel said, you cannot.
Is a win.
Yeah.
Like we're adding inline comments, so you don't have to do the. I call them sandwiches because that's how I remember how the stars go.
So I just learned something. Slash asterisk.
And yeah.
So I just learned something like a couple weeks ago that I don't know how I missed this. If you do the like old school CSS like sandwich comments, they show up in your output style sheet. And if you do the inline like JavaScript style ones, they don't. I just learned this. I thought that was really.
Oh yeah.
Does that please at least one other person here like just learn this with me? Yeah.
No, I love that feature. Love it.
Yeah.
Because then you can put all your snarky comments in there if you want.
And they won't get output.
And they won't be in production.
But comment as you go, right? Like, okay, I've taken out all the color variables. Here's my variables file. What does this all do? I'm pulling out button styles, like comment, and then like in your style sheet where you've removed stuff, like in your client style sheet where you've removed stuff, be like, comment, like button styles are now here. If you want to extend this, do X. Like the documenting as you go.
And also like this is a really dirty hack.
Yeah.
This is why we had to do this.
Yeah.
And put your to-do items and refactor notes there, because we do this all the time. We do refactor passes. So instead of
rep for to do.
Right. So instead of climbing the mountain like I'm going to refactor the entire system, you'll never accomplish it. So start and say we're just going to do a pass. And so like one pass could even just be something typographic refactoring. Somebody's done these really long lines, and I'm going to say I want everything alphabetical order, one attribute per line. And I'm just changing CSS. That's all I'm doing. Then and just do a whole pass on your whole system that way. Commit, good to production, everything good. Next thing. But every time you see something, put it either in a CSS or an ERB comment or whatever kind of file you're working in, and say to do, so you can search for it, and then just bullet points. And we do this. We just did a huge pass on our production system pipeline, and there's one page that we took from a 3,000 line file into about 40 partials. and this is more of an ERB thing, but it's the same principles apply. And every single one of those has such horrible code like all throughout it. But the point was not to fix everything at once. It was to just get this broken up. So the first pass was break it all up, and we add everything we saw in there just a to-do for each file. And now we can go back and tackle one file at a time, push that to production. So, and I think if you're going to do a system where you're going from a big CSS file to an SCSS system, figure out that, like, kind of talk about that system up front. Like if you're going to do something like Dale showed yesterday, and kind of actually have that framework thought out a little bit. Like we're going to approach it from this angle, so you have a place where files should live. Because the worst thing is where you suddenly, if you have just includes and suddenly there's 30 files in there and there's no clarity to it, that doesn't make it much better. That's still difficult. It's not developer. It's all about developer happiness on the SaaS side for us.
And your bus factor.
Yes.
That if someone gets hit by a bus, that you are not a.
Yeah, the number is always higher than 1. Or it should be.
I'll follow that up with another question. When and why do you refactor, and how does SaaS help you do that?
Always.
Yeah, all of the time. So I think it's Gina.
Elise is checking notes.
Sorry, yes, I'm not like being super rude. I have notes. I think this is something that Gina says in her talks. You refactor for clarity, maintainability, efficiency, and dry. Right? You refactor because your app changes over time. You refactor because you suddenly have new requirements. You refactor because you did that one way and it was good at the time, but now it's not so good anymore because something has changed. And for me, the thing that I'm working on refactoring right now is back to Tim's talk about buttons. Like when I wrote the original buttons module in my app, the placeholder extend wasn't a thing. And so I have these classes for buttons. And it was fine. It was a totally valid way to do it at that time. But now, there's a better way, right? And so I'm refactoring, and I need to go and change some of those class names and go through my app and test and like make it a little more bulletproof. I'm really interested in like this like idea of like code safety, right? Like I have a lot of offshore developers, and mostly they don't touch the CSS and HTML, but sometimes they do. And when they write something like a button, I asked this in Tim's talk, like sometimes it's a link, sometimes it's an input, sometimes it's a button, and I need to make sure that my code is kind of like bulletproof. And so there's ways to go back and refactor. And like for me, that's why, what I do that for. Like where are the places that are like, this is okay, how could I make it more awesome? And then it's just a matter of determining like what's like more or less important, right? Like this is exploding, like this is just kind of cool. In like the spectrum.
And if you're in a fast-moving environment, you have to kind of institute something. We had an issue. LivingSocial grew so dramatically as an engineering department that it was the famous quote is "just shit it out." And the problem is that a lot of people were just leaving it at the 80% mark because it worked, but it wasn't great because they were on to the next project. And so what Chad Fowler helped us institute was this Clean Up Friday mentality. So you could not ship new code on Friday. And awesome. This is really hard to, Chad was VP of engineering, so he said, let it be written, let it be done, and that was the end of it. But if you can go in there and say, we need to make sure that we're doing this, because you can't take 2 weeks off to clean something up. I mean, most companies don't have that. But if you make this just part of your weekly workflow, most people aren't shipping code on Friday because you don't want it to crash over the weekend and everybody have a scramble. So you're usually shipping Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. But if you go in on Friday and you're just basically saying, okay, I'm going to clean up all this stuff we shipped earlier and then push that up, nothing new is going out. You're just making it better.
Perfect time to do inline comment documentation.
Yes, that too.
That you didn't do.
Well, or put your documentation before you write what you're going to do.
Document-driven development. README-driven development.
It is a thing. It is a thing. Say what you're going to do and then do it. So.
It's a very
radical
idealistic of you.
All right, we'll take another question from the audience. And if you ask this question and you want to do a follow-up, find the mic. Someone asked, can you talk a bit about working with teams on large SaaS projects?
I can.
I absolutely can't, because when I started doing this, it was only me.
I feel like the LivingSocial story probably is the most relevant here.
We have 30 some odd engineers working on internal tools. Most of them are Rubyists and Rails guys. And like I said, there's 4 of us on my team. One guy's a pure UXer, and there's 3.5 of us that can do front-end development. So a lot of the time we're coming in and a project's already going. And so we built this gem that kind of encapsulated, here's how you start. You get some generators that put your code out there, and you're basically running with the whole look and feel out of the gate. There's also built-in documentation in the gem, so as you pull up your app and you spin up on localhost 3000, you go to /wild/docs, and then you have all of the documentation. It was also an excuse for us to use Isotope because we thought that was cool, which is that JavaScript thing that'll do all the stuff. But that's how we have our index for the documentation. The benefit here is that the engineers can go in and look about how to implement this, how to build this. And I mean, this is basically, we took all the pieces of different frameworks that we liked and built our own. And I encourage that if you have the time and the staff to make that a reality, because long term, you're then not having to say, oh crap, Bootstrap 3 came out, and if I update to it, it breaks everything. So when you're dealing, though, with a lot of the different developers, very often they will hack something in just because they have to ship something. And one of the benefits of us moving a lot of the framework stuff out of the way is that they couldn't break it. I know that's kind of a kid gloves approach in a way to say, nope, you don't touch this. But if they need to fix something or change something for their unique perspective, they'll override it. Likewise, if we have a new design piece that comes up in that process, and it's something we think we're going to reuse, we'll actually bring that across to Wild, document it, set it up, and then message out to the team, hey, you now have this available. For example, timeline's one thing that we put in recently. So having an icon along a linear line that's basically a long list of events, something that we did for one app, but we figured other people are going to want this, so here's how we pull it out. Once you provide a good kit of parts, it's very rare that you end up with a lot of new design stuff happening. Because this is how a modal is, this is how this is, this is how this is, and I'd say we have a new design element show up now once a quarter.